They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Meng. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis. Hi friends, this is Brittany Meng, host of the Motherhood Metamorphosis podcast. It's been about 10 months since I've dropped a new episode on this podcast, and I'm really happy to be back. I'm happy to share my journey with you, what's happened in the last year, and I'm happy to be back in this space, creating content for you, sharing stories with you, and hopefully encouraging you where you're at in your motherhood journey. I wanted to share something I wrote today about podcasting and what it's like to take a long break and finding yourself again. So I shared this short reflection on Facebook with a picture, and one of them was this messy before picture of the space I used to podcast in my walk-in closet. And the second picture is the after I cleaned it up. So here's the post. This is a before and after post, or maybe it's a starting over or starting again reflection. On the left is a picture of my podcast space in our walk-in closet. It's been piling up with stuff because I haven't used it in over a year. The last podcast I published was at the end of February 2023, when I was neck high in my husband's deployment, parenting 5 kids solo. I was burnt out. I needed a break for sure. So I rested. For 10 plus months, I did other things. I wrote and illustrated and launched a book. That was cool. And I wondered, do I want to keep doing this? As the months progressed, I told lots of people I wasn't sure I wanted to podcast anymore. I even thought, it's too late. A break is like a month or 6 weeks or a summer or 6 months. Dude, you're pushing 10 months on this. Don't kid yourself. This is over. But maybe there's no timeline to finding your way back. Not to podcasting or your favorite hobby or who you were 5 years ago or before you were married or before you had a baby or 5 babies. Maybe there's not an expiration date for finding your way back to yourself. I have interviews today for the first time in forever, and I've got butterflies in my stomach. A little voice asking, do you remember how to do this? But I cleaned out my podcast space in our walk-in closet. It's cluttered and full and isn't aesthetic or really that pretty. But it's mine, my space to create and connect and tell stories and share life. I think I'm ready to begin again, because maybe it's never too late to begin again and find your way back to yourself. I wanted to share that with you because I think this podcast is about finding your way back to yourself. We talk a lot in the introduction about being in the goop, how you dissolve and then become something new. And I think sometimes that doesn't just happen when you have a baby. It happens throughout your life. And for me, I needed to take a break. The deployment was really hard on me. It was hard on my kids. It was 6 plus months of solo parenting, and it wasn't smooth sailing while my husband was gone. There were some really big struggles my kids were dealing with and that I had to parent through. And so I knew that I needed to take a break to recoup my mental health and my physical health. And I'm so happy that my kids are doing better, and I think I'm doing better too. But it took me a lot longer to come back than I thought I would. I thought maybe I'd start back in the fall, and I just wasn't ready. So I thought, okay, 10 months is about the time it takes for a full-term pregnancy, maybe adding a little postpartum into that. So if we're going to use a metaphor of growing a baby and birthing a baby and going through that transition, maybe coming back to yourself and finding yourself is a metaphor that I'm using for myself too, as I come back to something that was a passion project of mine, something that I really poured my heart and soul into. But I want to say welcome back. I want to say that to you, and I want to say that to me as I'm finding my way back to new ways of creating and being myself. I want to share some new ways that I'm going to be interacting with the podcast as I move forward, and new ways for you to interact with the podcast too. One is that I want to be more mindful about my time. My favorite part of podcasting is actually doing the interviews and talking to people. I find that invigorating. It lifts me up. It fills my cup, and I love it. And like I said in my post, I did 2 interviews today and they both went really well. And I'm so excited to share those with you in the coming weeks. But the behind the scenes stuff is what has been the biggest time suck for me. And honestly, what I was thinking about when I told people, I don't know if I want a podcast anymore. So I've been doing a lot of brainstorming about how can I make the behind the scenes stuff, the scheduling, the editing, the social media promotion, how can I make that better for me? One thing that has helped me even now as I've been scheduling interviews is I'm using a scheduling software, Calendly. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's an online format for scheduling things, and it's already made my life so much better with streamlining emailing and Zoom signups. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. This is saving me a lot of time. The thing is, it does cost money if you're going to use it to its full capacity. So that is a new thing that I am paying for, along with my podcast hosting site, and I'm paying for Zoom too, because Zoom only gives you 40 minutes of free minutes for meetings, and that's just not enough time to not feel rushed for podcast recording. And I'll get to some ways to support the podcast in a little bit, but I also wanted to share maybe some of my perfectionistic tendencies that made podcasting the previous 3 seasons harder for myself than it needed to be. I really believe in creating good art, and I see podcasting as an art form. I have realized that I've been more of a perfectionist than maybe I needed to be. As I've consumed more podcasts myself over the last year and more, I've realized that content is king. What you're listening to, if the content is good, you don't really care if there's long pauses, or if people say a lot, or they have verbal pauses like, And those are things that I was spending a lot of time editing out because I wanted the podcast to be smooth and perfect, and I didn't want things to be distracting. But I think I'm going to let myself be a little more human. I'm going to let my guests be a little more human, and not edit out as much of the humanness that I was before. So maybe you'll hear some more pauses. Maybe you'll hear some more verbal tics that people have, the natural flow of language as it goes. And I'm going to give that time back to myself that I was editing. And I'm still going to edit. I think I'm really going to have to rein myself in and let it be good enough and not perfect. And that's something that I'm going to be working on. So coming back to the behind the scenes costs. So all in all, the cost of the podcast for me is about $40 a month, with all of those things that I talked about: hosting, Zoom, and the scheduling software that I'm using. And I had some ways that listeners can support the podcast in previous seasons. One of them was Patreon. We had Buy Me a Coffee. We kind of had a bunch of things. I am going to be utilizing ads in the future because I need this to pay me back, maybe give me back my time in a monetary form. And also there are ads available on Buzzsprout, which is the hosting site that I use. And I'm like, why not? And so you're going to be hearing some ads on the podcast. So that's going to be new. Another way that's different is I have discontinued Patreon, and this is the story behind that. When I was not podcasting for those 10 months, Patreon was continuing to run, and I felt so guilty about taking people's money when the podcast was not producing new episodes. I was still paying for those things and technically people were still supporting me. But in the last few months, I went on and refunded as much money as I could to people who had been paying and closed down Patreon. And I realized that with the unpredictability of my life, because I am a military spouse and a mom of 5, there are going to be seasons where I'm not going to be able to podcast. Maybe that might last for a few months. I think I'm going to be taking summers off, and I just don't want to take people's money during that time. So there's no longer a Patreon for the Motherhood Metamorphosis. However, I have leaned more into Buy Me a Coffee, which is kind of a one-off support site where people can just say, hey, I want to support you, a one-time gift. And that fits more with my conscience, and I hope that it will connect more with you. So if you are listening and an episode just really resonates with you and you're like, wow, that uplifted me, I feel encouraged, I have some new thoughts I maybe want to put in practice in my own life or my motherhood, you can head on over to Buy Me a Coffee and you can choose a monetary amount, maybe $3 or $5 or whatever you have in your mind. There's also a really cool feature I discovered that's called the shop, and it's just a click over on the page, and I have added some fun things to the shop. Some of them are free, some downloads, some of them are art that I've created that people can buy, and all the proceeds will go to the podcast. And I actually have a feature on there that is called Mom Mentoring Coffee and Chat, and it's a Zoom session with me. If you'd like to talk to me, if you thought, hey, I really like to pick Brittany's brain, or I really want to share my story to somebody who's just going to listen. I love to listen. I love to hear people's stories, and I will not give any advice unless you ask. I think there's just this wonderful healing that can take place when we feel seen and heard. And I want to offer that to you, listener. If that speaks to you, you can look into the virtual coffee and chat on Buy Me a Coffee, if that's something that you would like to do in the future. I want to share this quote with you guys. I'm reading this book called The Body Keeps Score. Maybe you have heard of it. It's been pretty popular with, popular psychology, healing from trauma circles. I'm really interested in mental health. It's a passion of mine, and I've just gleaned so much from this book. I'm still listening to it on the audiobook. But this quote just really spoke to the core of who I am as a person, who I want to be as a writer, as a friend, and a podcaster. So I wanted to share it with you. It's from chapter 5 of The Body Keeps Score by Bessel A. van der Kolk. Being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. Social support is the most powerful protection against becoming overwhelmed by stress and trauma. Social support is not merely being in the presence of others. The critical issue is reciprocity, being truly heard and seen by the people around us, feeling that we are held in someone else's mind and heart. For our physiology to calm down, heal, and grow, we need a visceral feeling of safety. And a couple seasons ago, I had a friend, a guest who came on the podcast, and we were talking about whether podcasting counts as friend time or as social time. And we kind of debated and went back and forth about whether it did count, because you're kind of listening in on a conversation. Maybe you're even interacting in your own mind, and maybe it fills up your cup a little bit where you don't feel so alone afterwards, or you feel like you've been seen in a new way, or you've been able to see yourself in a new way. And I loved this idea of a critical element to safeguarding against stress and trauma and overwhelm, which I think are very real in our motherhood journeys. We do feel overwhelmed a lot. We do feel stressed. Sometimes trauma is part of the equation, and we can't help that. I think that being seen and held in someone else's mind and estimation can help us heal and grow. And I want the podcast to be a space for that, a space for reciprocity. The idea of somebody being seen and hearing your story, maybe in somebody else's words, maybe making connections that you had never made in your own life before as you listen to someone else's story. Or maybe even hearing somebody else's story and realizing and carrying that with you for some time in the future, where you're able to make a connection with another person because you heard something new on a podcast. And I just wanted to share that with you all, and maybe it'll give you some new food for thought as you move forward in your life too. But I hope you'll keep coming back for each episode of this new season, and it'll be a place for you to grow and feel seen and heard and loved. Finally, I just wanted to share some insights that I have gleaned about podcasting as a medium. I started out my writing journey on blogging. That was many, many moons ago, 10 plus years ago, and then moved into social media. And social media can be a tricky beast as far as, finding things that go viral, finding ways to connect with readers, and, growing your page. It's like a whole hustle culture. And I've gotten caught up in that a lot. It's really hard not to get caught up in it. And I think I wanted to fit podcasting into that same realm, the same why isn't this growing? Why isn't this quote unquote going viral? Feeling frustrated maybe with the slowness of podcasting. But the whole point of a podcast is it's long form media. It is a slow content. It's slow in a mindful way, which is good because I think sometimes we can get really caught up in social media. I know I can, and it can add to this frantic pace in our minds and add to a frantic pace in our lives and make us feel more anxious. So I think that podcasting and listening to podcasts allows our minds to step away from fast-paced media, and it can slow us down. It can slow us down in thought. It can slow us down in our mindfulness, and it can help us think about new ways of being, in new ways of thinking, and maybe new ways of being a woman and being a mom as you listen to this podcast. So I like the idea of me leaning more into slow, mindful media and embracing that instead of feeling frustrated with a lack of growth or a lack of downloads. I think that's just my own personal growth that I need to work on. So I just want to welcome everyone back to the podcast. Thanks for sticking with me. I hope that you are working through the goop in your own life and being patient with yourself as you are transforming into someone new, as you go through these transitions in your own family, in your own soul, and in your own life. I can't wait for season 4, and thanks for being here along for the ride. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyameng@gmail.com.